Hello, hello, hello. I'm back. Oof, it's been a while since I've done one of these. Back in, yeah, I think it was March or something when term three ended, but it's nice to be back. I really stepped away from the podcast format, which is nice in a way because it's a little bit less of you, like, viewers listening to me just blabber and actually having something to look at, refer to, be more engaged. So hopefully you guys like this and hopefully I can continue doing more of these because it's fun. But let's dive into term three and four reflections. It is the longest semester. It is the most rewarding semester. It 6 months. It'll change you. That's for sure. People say it's very daunting. It's like the toughest. Not like it's not toughest because of the content per se. It's challenging, but I would say it's more so the stamina you need to keep on just marathoning through the semester. It's the duration that really drains you. Yeah, because there's lots of recycling in this semester with new stuff, new perspectives, but it's the duration that really knocks you. Yeah, but let's dive in and I will talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Yeah, and let's just get to it. So, this is just the agenda, so I'll do a little bit of an intro, a little disclaimer, and then term three, I'll just do a quick brush up on it. There's already a video up that I made, so just refer to that, I would say. And then we have the term four, the meat of this whole reflection, really, where I go through each of the blocks, talk about what I took away from each module, and then also I have little hindsight moments. I myself might have horrendous eyes, but my hindsight, ooh, something. So I will, yeah, we'll talk a few points for each module about what I wish I could have changed or something to keep in mind for my juniors that I myself didn't keep in mind. And we'll also do that for clinical skills. And then we'll wrap up with life outside of medicine, specifically my life, but yeah, because you sure as heck need one of those in this semester to beat the burnout, to beat the monotony. Yeah, so let's get to it. So, just the disclaimer, it's just the big takeaways. It's my experience at the end of the day. Do not let this shadow or cloud your judgment. Just take it with a grain of salt and keep on going ahead. Do not fix anything that isn't broken. I am the biggest advocate for that one line because, oh my gosh, you will hear 100 different things. This resource being used, that resource being used. Heck, even when I was starting term three, I remember I put a story, oh, I'll compile a list of resources I use or stuff that's handy. I can't advocate for stuff that I myself don't use, and I don't use a lot. So, if anyone here is looking forward to some sort of like grand master list. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I can only, talk about stuff I myself have done. And, it's worked out so far, right? Touch wood. So, yeah, do not fix anything that isn't broken. Don't drastically change anything that you do not think that needs to be changed because it's a tumultuous term as it is. Why create more tumultuosity, more change and stress unnecessarily? So just keep it simple. I promise you'll make it to the finish line. Okay, so let's go to it. Term three, the public health potpourri. It is different. It's like scraps of term one mixed with a little bit of like community health, population health, biostats. I did 2 years of biostats at my bachelor's, so it was a really big flashback for me. It was nice. It was a nice break. Doing math for once after doing this multiple choice all the time. It was nice. Um, Ethics was challenging for me personally. And again, there's a lot of flaws I did, which I will talk about in the next slide, but overall it's a nice semester with some extra time, so I would definitely use that extra time appropriately to beat burnout, like, to treat myself, relax in the time I do have, but also to hone in on some weak stuff whenever like it was like a tough few days or a tough block, tough concept. Overall, it's a nice term. It's a nice term. It's different, but it's nice. So I did have a video. It's only 58 seconds long. I recommend watching it. It's really cute because I made it, but I definitely recommend watching it. I have just these 5 points that I took away from that. Like point one being, don't be easily swayed. You'll have people like me, you'll have forums, you'll have posts, or like a friend of a friend said this, or a senior said this. Take it, listen to it. Obviously, don't like be like thick-skulled and like, oh no, I'm gonna be rigid in my ways. But don't be easily swayed that like, you know, you're not able to enjoy the actual semester, the actual term, the actual block because of what people are saying. I did that a little bit to be honest with ethics. I I I underestimated it. I was like, oh, I'll just read the companion. Everyone was like, oh, if you read the companion, you'll do amazing on ethics. Well, reading isn't enough. That's just really passive. But also, I made notes here and there. But still, I feel like there was a lot I could have done better with that. So don't over stress about it, but don't take it too lightly like I did. Prioritize insightfully. Don't get too cozy. I was like, the escapism was bad when it came to ethics. You can see I've been traumatized by ethics, but like I used to run to immunology. The prof was amazing. Number one, her slides fantastic. It was just so fun. Her lectures. So and it was a hard science too. So I just wanted to study that all the time. I didn't want to look at ethics notes and look at that companion, but yeah, I definitely recommend get through the ugly first. Get through whatever your weak spot is, whether it's biostats or whatever. Do it and just reward yourself with the stuff you do like. Um, Milk those questions. Oh my God, I cannot stress that enough. I feel like with generally, I don't recommend using external sources that much for this semester, especially for the ethics, to be honest, because they're really bound to that companion. They love that companion. They love the lecture slide. So if you just practice with that and the questions they provide you, I think that's plenty. But with the other stuff, if you feel like you don't have enough practice with what they're providing, use the other stuff. Because this is like term 3 and 4 is the first time you're not having ESOFT quizzes, right? It's just Sakai questions, and that's it, and IMCQs. So milk those as much as you can. Because like especially for ethics, to make it less about rote memorization and better connecting the concepts, I feel like doing the questions well and utilizing them well. Like, okay, so the answer for this question is A, for example, but what can I do to change the question stem to make it the correct answer B, C, D, like that. So I feel like just maximize your potential with those questions so that you can really be on your feet with this. Yeah, and don't fall behind with the companion. I fell behind with the companion. I don't know. I feel like it's just Zoom. The fact that we are, I'm sorry, I'm going to diverge just a bit. The fact that we are in Zoom school for such a long time, we got like a taste of what it was to be like an in-person student at Northumbria, which was so beautiful, so fun. But then all of a sudden to be like put into this Zoom school thing, and it's draining. It's draining. So I do commend everybody who has made it this far in this way, and the burnout will be there. I can't even like, I myself haven't gotten rid of it fully, and I feel like learning to effectively relax, that is a skill. That is a skill that I have yet to learn. So if anybody does know how to do that, please comment. Please give me some sort of advice because I would love that. But I don't blame people who struggle with burnout even before like the semester is gone into full swing. It's totally normal. But coming back to the point, yeah, make time for yourself. Try your best to cope with the burnout, cope with the exhaustion, the monotony of Zoom school. If you do not have these problems, good for you, because just be the sunshine you are and radiate that energy to us because we need it. But yeah, make time for yourself. I feel like with the easier blocks and stuff, or easier concepts, easier days, use that extra time to unwind, relax a bit, pace yourself. Whereas when it's a little tougher, like, oh, with ethics, I should have used my extra time to hammer more in, make more algorithms, mind maps, or something to, tie stuff together, hammer out those weak points. So use your like free time effectively for yourself as well as for your weak spots. And then finally, appreciate the mosaic, because the thing is, to be honest, this is like a little random blip of something different. Back in term 4. When you're in term 4, you're going to be back to usual things that you've been experiencing in term one in terms of the styles of, like, the content of questions is science, science, science. So appreciate, as exhausting as it might be at times, the different variety of content you're being taught, because I'm sure it will come back up and during rotations, even later on. The public health, the human aspect of being a doctor. We can be good at with our theory, we can be good with our application, but it's kind of all meaningless at the end of the day if you can't be, if you don't retain that human aspect, that humanity within you, that empathy. So yeah, appreciate that you'll have to don several hats, and this is a rare time in your career that you can, like in your 4-year time in med school, that you get to learn it firsthand. So yeah, okay, so that's term 3. Okay, so term 4 now. It's a lot of breadth and depth, like you're covering a lot, but then you're going deeper into stuff that you already saw in term 1. It's quite something, but it's the first time you actually start feeling like a doctor, and that's thanks to the small groups and how they beautifully integrate the small groups with the lectures for most of the time. So it's a semester that will make you into something quite more than what you initially were. So let's dive in. Okay, so here's a bird's eye view in terms of there's only 4 modules, so it's not like 5 exams like it was with terms 1 and 2. It's just 4 exams, but with the duration is pretty much consistent except for the last module, so that's when it really, you can't avoid it. You're gonna, if you weren't hit with burnout then, like before, it's gonna hit then, because you just want to be done. You just want to be done. We only had a weekend, 2 days in between term 3 and term 4. So we hit the ground running. That's how it is. So yeah, it's something, but people survive, you shall survive. In terms of prime systems, there's just, like, for each module, FTCM, like, it's a lot of recycling. Like, if anybody remembers year 1, the first block was a lot of, like, university sciences basics review. So the same here, we're just doing the basics of year 1. We're just reviewing that, and we're setting in the foundations for pathology and micro. You're getting used to that teaching style, that format, that perspective when you're looking at familiar content now with a new lens. Yeah. So, and then with CRS, we have our circulatory renal system, so that was something. And then, yeah, each system is covered. RHS was quite interesting because, like, you dive into the world of blood. I think in year 1 we didn't go as in depth with blood, just like, oh, what's a basophil, this, that, like, what should be expected to see, but never really that much in depth with the hemopoietic system. So this time we do go, and it's a doozy, man. That's but yeah, it's quite something. And then we finish off with DERS, where you have just a little bit of GI, endocrine, and reproductive systems. And because we covered most of what we did in year 1 in 1 semester, like term 5, I think, is just a bit of, like, we wrap up with neuro, and then we do the recycling again as step approaches. But in terms of assessments, you now have more than just your exams to be concerned about in terms of getting those points, right? So you have your attendance, you have IMCQs, and then you have these exams, but now also you have SOAP assessments where you work, like, in groups to conduct a patient history, write up a SOAP note in a given amount of time. And then you also have your physical exam assessment, which is like multiple choice exam. It's kind of like we had a similar anatomy skills assessment in year 1, so similar in that sense, lab skills assessment. So yeah, the PE assessment is something like that. And OCX, which is you have your clinical skills evaluated, you're doing a full patient history and exam in person, well, over Zoom, with 2 encounters, and you have to figure out within 17 minutes for each encounter what is wrong with the patient, and you have to convey that, and just, yeah. And in terms of my performance for, like, overall each module, like, what if I had to self-evaluate, FTCM was nice. I was like, okay, it's a nice start, fine. We're doing good, whatever. And then CERS, it was like, okay, there's a crazy story with this one, and this I think speaks volumes about my own self-sabotaging nature. The thing is, I wasn't feeling well that day, so I had to take some medication. And the thing is, I that medication I didn't notice it had a histamine blocker, and it was a central acting histamine blocker. So I was so dizzy. Like I don't remember half of what I clicked and did in the questions that day. And the sad part is I performed better on that exam than FTCM. I don't know. I don't know. It blows my mind too. Like me being drugged out is better than me having my wits with me. That there's something wrong with that, right? But that also goes to say trust your gut, because with DERS the same thing happened. I didn't that was there was no other exam I was drugged out for, but the last one I had I was so sick and tired. I was just so done with everything. I'm like, I just want to get to the end of the line. I was just clicking. I'm like, don't you dare click, don't you dare start clicking on another answer after you've selected it, unless you have some really divine intervention, got like some really strong reason to change. Do not change your answer. And I did fantastic with that last exam. Personally, I found like I've improved wildly with that. So I there's something wrong with me. And if you are like me, just listen to your gut. And sometimes you just don't know why you picked that answer, but it's right. Just stick with it. Yeah. And so, yeah, RHS was the toughest module for me, to be honest. The blood systems, I will talk more about that, but don't underestimate it. Oh, my Lord, yeah. Because I was kind of like bouncing off of stuff how I performed in year one. And I loved renal, I loved lungs, wasn't a fan of the heart. Now the tables turned. I learned to love the heart, but now my blood and lungs were a little bit weaker this time, so let's see how things go next semester. But yeah, this is just a bird's eye view. It'll go by fast, believe me. It seems like, oh my God, it's only March by the time you start term 4, and it's like you have to get to June, or like I think for the upcoming, my juniors, it'll be like December, so but it'll fly by. It will fly by, and you will savor your holiday. But okay, let's go in with the rest of this. Okay, so FTCM, the first block. Like a lot of like the first blocks, the foundations of anything, it's going to be a little scattered. So that's what it was. Organization and indigestibility varied across disciplines. One thing you have to get straight with term 4, like in year 1 you had genetics, you had histo, like those were the different lens you were looking through different diseases, different like concepts. Now the 3 lens that you'll be looking through 100 different things are micro, pharm, and pathology. So personally, I found pathology was much more scattered. It's a scattered module as a whole, but pathology was much more scattered compared to microbio. Microbio lectures are intrinsically the way they are. It's easy to compartmentalize. It's like, oh, all the skin infection causing agents, all the bone infection causing agents, this, that. It's just remembering the nitty gritty that's a little annoying, but otherwise it's pretty much organized. Microbio. Pathology, not so much, because they're teaching you basic concepts and they're connecting it to like diseases from all different kinds, like from cancer to like thyroid issues. So it's very scattered in that sense. But it's doable. You'll be referring to a lot of these concepts in the subsequent modules, so might as well get used to it. And then definitely refer to year 1 notes to have proper scaffolding for tough concepts. I was relying on my year 1 notes just to freshen up. It's like, oh yeah, this looks familiar, but like let's just brush up on it so that I can properly integrate stuff into the existing schema I have for like autonomic pharmacology. Oh my God, autonomic pharmacology. I'll rant about that soon, but oh, it's so much funner. A lot of things are funner this semester. It's a recycling module. That's the third thing I want to say, which needs to be recycled for subsequent modules. So it itself, it's a recycling module in the sense that year 1 stuff is reiterated a lot here. But then this stuff itself, like this module, like the basic concepts of pathology, microbio, you will be reiterating that in the next 3 blocks for sure. So overall, it's a good module. Not a favorite, but it's a good module. And in terms of hindsight, like, ooh, what I could have worked on, do not slack with the application. Don't push the questions till the end, or, oh, I'll address this weak spot later. Do it in the moment. One more thing I would like to say is that because these are basic things, it's easy to be like, oh, this is like common sense, this is fine, but it's not until you actually apply it, you're like, oh, well, okay, never mind. I can't even get this basic thing right. So it's better to just push through that. I know it's tiring. You just got through term 3, and now it's like, oh my God, I have to get back on the grind and get through with it. I'll ease up in the basics part of it. Don't ease up too much. Ease up, but don't ease up too much, because it will come back to bite you like 2 blocks down, next block, something. It will come back to bite you. And then pathology small groups. Oh my God. They are so useful. I did not appreciate them in the moment, but then with the subsequent blocks, I learned to love them more and more. To be honest, of the small groups, you're gonna have micro small groups, pathology small groups, and drug small groups, and then the clinical skills small groups. Clinical skills and path small groups were the most useful for me, to be honest. Micro small group, I think I've only been to 1. Because you know it's 80% attendance, use that time, like the attendance, wisely, because you really want to save up time in your last block, so you want to keep those saves for later. Better to get through as much as possible now. Yeah, so make use of those pathology small groups, because that group learning, it's a lot nicer. Because personally, the pathology slides were not my cup of tea at times, and that's why I had to use extra resources, which I will talk about, like Pathoma, to really set things in my head. Because, yeah, so pathology small groups is another form where you get another nice pass, a nice deeper pass, hearing it from somebody about the material. And yeah, it's much more active. You make your own question and all of that. And a thing to keep in mind, just as like for people who aren't a fan of pathology, I'm not like a diehard fan. I've learned to like it now, but I'm not a diehard fan. It is going to be tested very heavily on the step 1 exam, so it's a good call to get on top of it as soon as possible, rather than be like, oh, I'll save it for when I do step prep. No, get on top of it now. And again, milk the questions. But don't run to comfort zone questions. Like for me, the rat puzzles, you'll know when you get there, but there's for autonomics, it's not just simple multiple choice questions like, oh, okay, what's this in this situation? You'll have tables and you'll see like, okay, this parameter went up, this like peripheral vascular resistance went down, and stuff like that. And you have to figure out what was the drug that was given. And that was so fun. It's a learning curve. Like it takes a while to get the hang of it, and go to the small group for this one. I usually don't like farm small groups, but go to the small group for rat puzzles, for autonomic pharmacology for sure, because they teach you a process, a way to approach the questions. Do it. So yeah, I got really comfortable with the rat puzzles, and I used to put off like the other stuff I wouldn't like as much. But don't do that. And speaking of which, the thing is, immunology, you learn it, the basics, in term 3, and it will come back in term 1, this FTCM block. So don't slack off with immunology either. It's a continuing theme in all the blocks really. And push yourself as much as possible to compartmentalize and to group as much as you can, because we are human, and I think there's so many studies conducted that it's impossible for a human to remember nitty-gritty, integrate, and stuff. Yeah, just chunk it up, because that's the only way you can effectively do the process of elimination. Nothing sucks more than like you're doing the elimination thing, you yourself aren't sure. It's like this is such a big risk if I totally eliminate this option and then narrow it, like, narrow down to this and this. So become a better master eliminator by chunking up your information, integrating as you are learning. So like, for example, the drugs, all the eye receptors, oh my God, bromocryptine, all of the stuff that works on your eyes for glaucoma and God knows cataracts, this, that. I used to group it, and like antidotes. No matter how many weak spots are in those groups, in your chunks that you make, take it as an opportunity to hammer out the kinks in the knowledge. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I feel like it's easier to chunk for microbiome because, like I said, it's like, oh, skin infection causative agents, bone infection causative agents. There's a little bit of overlap. That's what makes it trickier with microbiome, but it's relatively easier to chunk microbiome than path because, again, you're learning basics that are scattered for path. But overall, a doable module. It's a good module, and it's a good time to experiment with your study technique now rather than later, as you will find out from my own experience. But okay, let's move on to the next block. Okay, so CRS, cardio, renal, it's, yeah, something. But this one, so this module, remember how I said it's like different, like disciplines fluctuate depending on the module? Here, microbiome was like a lecture or two. It was very small. Whereas path was very, very dense and layered. It was, you think like when you see this path, it's like, okay, we're learning all about these like blood vessel disorders. Oh, we're learning about directly the heart disorder. So it's easy to group things up. But then when you realize, oh my God, these chunks are not, oh, it's like a little, like a few layers here and there. It's like mountains of information, and it's easy. It's like a mirage. You think it's like this, but it's not. So that was pathology. There was a lot of nitty gritty, a lot of layers. So I cannot emphasize enough to be very on top of your active learning for this module, to algorithmize, to group concepts. Just do it. Do it. You will thank yourself when you are in that exam. Hopefully not drugged out like I was. And then pharmacology, it's the heaviest in this module. It's like you feel like a doctor, be like, oh my God, there's so many drugs, like antiarrhythmic drugs, learning those curves, learning the side effects, oh my God, guys, there's so much. So basically with pharm, you don't have enough time. You don't have enough time to spend time making 100 notes and like trying to like drown yourself in the actual slides and the notes. Just apply. You do a pass or two and then you apply. Pharmacology intrinsically is already compartmentalized, but given the volume of information, just practicing, reading the stems, trusting your gut is everything. So like you guys have heard of the saying perhaps, like, don't like blame the game, like don't blame the player, but like play the game, something along those lines. I'm awful with this, but learn to read the stems, because once you know what they're going for, or it's like, oh, it's this category of questions, oh, they're going to talk about ventricular agents, oh, they're like, then you can automatically shift gears and put your mind in that zone. So yeah, that's pretty much it for pharm. And then the microbiome, it was very light. I loved it. Oh my God. You talk about pericarditis, myocarditis, and endocarditis. Yeah, and the different causative agents. But it's so light, so little. But then that's where they get you. It's a double-edged sword because given that it's just a small amount of information, they can really go deep with the nitty-gritty in terms of testing you. That's the benefit. Like, that's why I like the BSCE so much, because there's so much information. They can't go so deep into it. They need to test like high yield stuff, main big concepts, big picture stuff. But when you're already given like a small slice of pie, they can go down to the little grains and the crumbs of everything. So know your staff and strep well. Know it so well. One detail like a valve replacement in the stem changes everything. And now in terms of the hindsight, well, pathology small groups, yes, please. If you were slacking with in the first module, FTCM, please like do the pathology small groups, because like I said, pathology is not a cakewalk with this module. You will need those small groups to help out. Be actively engaged, put in the work to make those slides, make those questions, because your group members will thank you and you yourself will thank you. And it also helps when your group members are really active. I was blessed to have a great group, and they really put the effort in to, contribute, give as much as they could. And we did a lot of learning from each other's presentations that way. And this is like the one module you need to avoid or at least keep burnout to a minimum, because it goes so fast. And to be honest, it goes by fast, and the organization of assessments, small groups, lectures, it was somewhat poor for this block. I made sure to give that as feedback for, like, the survey they give after you give the exam. It's like, oh, how was this block like? I was like, no, you don't do, like, we didn't have a day. You know how you usually have a day in between the exam day and like the last day of any sort of lecture, small group, IMCQ. We didn't have that. We finished off our last IMCQs a day before the exam, and then we have the exam. So it was a little different. It was a little stressful, and so I kind of fell a little behind with that. So it was exhausting. It was exhausting trying to just keep up and be like, okay, I have to make it through this exam. I have to push through. I can't fall behind. And the FTCM exhaustion earlier on, like, it came crashing down a little bit here. So if you do feel exhaustion in any block, deal with it then as soon as possible, rather than let the subsequent block be affected. And I think that is it, pretty much. Milk the pharmacology, like I said, learn to study the stems. I put it as a hindsight because I'd gotten into that mindset towards the end of the block rather than the middle or earlier in the block. So be on top of that. The stems will tell you everything you need to know, how to go about it. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next block. Okay, second last block, RHS. So with RHS, this was my toughest block. So with takeaways, what we have is that it is microbiome heavy. My lord, you only think that, oh, it's only from the mouth up until the lungs. So many things can go wrong in terms of microorganisms. Like DERS came into a close second when it came to like microbiome heavy modules. So the next block came in a close second. But what makes RHS micro so hard is that there's so many organisms, and they're very similar. And some of the organisms that affect one part of your respiratory tract also affect the other part of your respiratory tract. So just keeping on top of that, and on top of the biology, like, oh, is it gram-negative positive? Is it catalase positive? Like, oh my God, there's so much nitty-gritty. That's what made it tough. Like, there's some organisms that are so similar, and they only have one biological feature or two that's differentiating them. So reading the stems is so important for this reason. It's kind of like hard path, like in the sense that it's more that meets the eye with the microbiome of this respiratory block. But yeah, so it's learning to read the stems, because the professors, humans are like, we love our patterns, we love our nature, like, it's in our nature to, like, follow a certain way of things, a habit, a pattern. So pick up on the patterns that the people writing those questions are, adopting. And I'm not a fan of the microbiome slides. They're pretty much the same in general for all the blocks. And I'm not a fan of the organization, but like I said earlier, Dr. Harrington's algorithms are very helpful in terms of getting that big picture, because you're just having an organism and like a slide about it and like these clinical contexts, and it's a lot. And you just see the same thing over and over for like a very similar looking organism. So then having that algorithm is so helpful at this time. Use buzzwords, they're very helpful, but besides the microbiome, now farm, it wasn't heavy per se, but it wasn't light either. There was like maybe 3 or 4 lectures. There was a lot of cancer drugs, a lot. And I think for that, go to the Dr. Dasso office hour. I think he was the one who taught the cancer drugs, but then just do the practice. It's enough that way. But the farm isn't light, but the professors themselves, they are so good. They are so good. It's, especially Dr. Gatos for the tuberculosis drugs, and he did one more lecture, I'm forgetting, but he's so good because he himself was a student at SGU, and then now he's a professor, and he knows how to think like a student. And I think I've mentioned this in an earlier post or something, like, he reminded me of Dr. Malhotra from year 1. Just, they know how a student thinks, so they can tailor the lecture to make it so student friendly, and you don't even need to make your own notes separately or something. Like, you just refer to the slides and they're enough. And practice is plenty for that. Like it's great. It's great. And in terms of pathology, it was a 50-50 block because you have your lungs and then you have your blood disorders. But the lungs are a familiar favorite. You see like the COPD stuff, emphysema, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, bronchitis, and all of this. You see a little bit of new respiratory disorders, but it's pretty much similar. It's fine. Just focus on the buzzwords like honeycomb, this, that. Pick up the buzzwords for the lung path, and I think you should be fine with the stems and the questions. But the blood pathology, oh my God. That is something I'm going to use any free time I get. Maybe later on, once I relax, learn how to relax a bit, I might use a bit of my break to brush up on the blood pathology, because blood cancers are so hard. They're hard for me, and it's quite overwhelming. Invest time in blood path. I regret not doing more of that, and I think they put it more towards the end, so I feel like that also wasn't as helpful. I would have preferred blood path first and then lung stuff, but it is what it is. But yeah, that is RHS in a nutshell. But in terms of hindsight, I would take compartmentalizing up a notch, especially with micro, because things will be similar. You have to find stuff like you're learning viruses, you're learning fungi, you're learning bacteria. They're very similar, so just find ways to make it more digestible, chunk it up more, or however, but take it up a notch. Whatever you do that works for you, take it up a notch. And invest time, like pathology study time, in blood pathology. Lungs will have your back. The buzzwords have got your back, I swear. But the blood pathology, ooh, it's very easy to get lost in the stems with that if you do not know what you're dealing with. So know that theory well for blood path. And then in terms of making connections, do that with cardio, because it's like when relevant. Obviously, don't go unnecessarily making connections, but make connections with cardio when relevant, because again, the heart and lungs are like a joint unit. If something wrong happens with one of them, the other is bound to get affected eventually. I guess that applies to the whole body, but the heart and lung are tight, so so it's good. It's a good way to have some cumulative revision as well, because again, like every exam does have like 10 questions or so that is cumulative. It will come back to haunt you, so be on top of that. Thanks to like the Instagram stories, I forced myself to be on top of like sometimes of my cumulative review. It was fun that way. And I feel like the study groups, which I will go and preach about later on, but they like me and my study buddy, we have such a mindset for finding like, okay, like how can we connect this to the existing schema? How can we connect it so that like now we're paranoid with it. Like everything we see, it's like, wait, can I connect it to this, a previous concept? So that's how we got our cumulative review done. That's why I do not need Anki for now, but we'll talk more about that later. So that's it. That's it for RHS. Now let's go to the last block. Okay, so the last block, DERS, my favorite. Okay, so in terms of takeaways, this block kind of broke the trend in the sense that this block was quite balanced. Like the pathology, the micro, the farm, it was very balanced. It wasn't like one is severely more than the other. It was a nice little balanced bunch. Each discipline had equal footing. There was lots of drugs for farm, lots of micro. It was digestible, but there's just a lot of microorganisms. And then path, it was like cancer everywhere. Everything that we learned, it was like eventually the story led to cancer somehow. And then micro is just buzzwords and bio. Do yourself a favor, pick up the STEM patterns, the buzzwords, and just apply. Again, like with RHS, like how there was lots of microorganisms, and just doing the questions, compartmentalizing well is everything. Again, it's very important here as well, because most of the stems, everyone has tummy troubles, okay, but it's the other details that will help in like honing in on the correct answer. Pathology, like I said, cancer everywhere, but I liked in this module specifically with pathology that the story element wasn't much nicer. I like to think in stories with pathology. Pathology is stories, but this module is more easier, more apparent, the stories, like especially for, oh my god, I love endometrial hyperplasia. The cancer, like how you get from the excess, like any situation where you have excess estrogen, like granulosa cell tumor, or you have PCOS, then how that chronically, if that goes untreated or like not managed well, how it can create the conditions for and like the thickening of your endometrium, which can then go on to like what mutations happen to eventually become full-blown endometrial carcinoma. I loved it. It was so fun. And the thing is, burnout, it like, oh wait, let me just let you mention the farm before I mention the burnout. So with farm, it was a little bit scattered because you have a bit of GI drugs, you have diabetes drugs, love diabetes, and a bit of contraceptives. So it's a little bit of everything, and you have a growth hormone stuff. So it's like you have gonadotropic analogs, prostate cancer. It's very scattered, but answer choices and stems are very elimination method friendly. They're not going to play with you that much in terms of like, oh, it's only different by one word, like option A versus B. You'll be able to clearly spot the odd one out, like your correct answer if you prepare well, which is by doing the questions. So yeah, the lectures were also really good with this. I love the farm lectures for this block, like I did for the previous block. The lectures are the professors are very good with their delivery and their slide organization. Yeah, but pathology, in terms of the slides, it was the same. Like with micro and path, the slide format is always going to be the same. So that's what irks me when I say the organization isn't that great, but the story element was great. So, and you always have cancer, you always have some mutation to keep your mind busy with. But what I was gonna say was that with burnout, it was brutal, at least for me at this point. So Occam's razor is everything. Whatever is the simplest, don't use your brain. At least me, I don't need to use my brain because, as I mentioned, it messes me up. So Occam's razor it up, baby, because that's how you're gonna get to the finish line. In terms of hindsight, I would say, so again, small groups. Your group members have done plenty of presentations up until this point. They know how to present a path slide well. They know how to deliver a good question. They know how to, integrate stuff or like just help it sit better than what you see in lecture. So it's definitely invest your time in the pathology small groups. My group had gotten really good with the path presentation. So especially the last one, the last path small group, it was about the gestational pathology and all of that. We were so good with that. I didn't need to use notes. I just remembered what I had for from the actual presentations that we did for the small group, and I was ready for that exam. It was fine. They did very well. And yeah, and so then with any free time that I did have in terms of the burnout, because the burnout blues did hit bad, I wish I watched office hours. The thing is, one thing I've been doing constantly, in a way, like I was picking and choosing. I never watch all the office hours because that's a waste of my time. If I don't need it, I'm not gonna watch it. But I didn't get to watch a single office hour for this block because I was tired. I could have managed time a little bit better, but there was a lot to juggle with assessments and exams at this point. But any free time I had after somehow like plowing through the necessary tasks of the day, I didn't want to touch a screen. So it made watching office hours even more tough. So this module, which I didn't watch office hours, like I said, and so I think in those dead moments, especially in the evenings, because I'm more of an early bird, I work through the day, I wish I could have used my evenings a little bit better to passively even watch the office hours, because that's another pass at the material, which is nice. For the material you're struggling with, I really wish I could have watched some of the office hours again. And I was getting pretty hollow with each passing week, especially after the big blow that RHS gave. I was like, oh, I don't know how we can get through the next 6 weeks like this. but with common themes across different concept groups and paths like tumor markers. Like, had I made a cheat sheet, a little summary, it would have been nice to be more confident with my elimination method with these questions. It's a lot. That's why when I like for these previous slides, when I mentioned deal with the burnout in the moment whenever you can. I know it's hard, but whenever you do get that free time or those pockets of free time, deal with it, deal with it, deal with it, because you will need it, especially in this last final stretch. You will need it. That's those little things that go a long way, like having that little last bits of bursts of energy to compartmentalize, to exert a little bit extra to be confident, a little bit more confident than usual for that exam. Yeah, and that is it for DERS, to be honest. And let's get to the clinicals now. Okay, so clinical skills. It could be the most excruciating, painful small groups, or it could be an opportunity to grow, to be something, to like a burnout buster um, for you. Depends on how you take it, really. It's what you make of it. It's nobody's forcing you to really do, oh, you have to take history this time or this and that. If you don't take advantage of the opportunity, somebody else will, and that's their gain, your loss. But there are plenty of opportunities within each block to practice your patient encounter simulations. They really go hit the ground running with this stuff. I think it was like in that first week or two of the FTCM, they had that patient interviewing one, and I was like, oh my God. And I was the first one to do it in my group, and the first one, yeah, to do it. And they're just like, okay, so just try your best, do what you can, and it was brutal. I blanked out for a bit. I was like, wait, can we pause for a second? I had to collect my thoughts, and the group helped out a little bit here and there, like, oh, ask him that, ask him this. But they were very nice. They provided nice feedback. In terms of, yeah, but like, so that is the PE, the patient encounter simulations. You work together in your group to conduct a full encounter, from taking history, doing the physical exam, and giving a closure about what are steps ahead. And it's really relevant to the block. So I feel like if you're on top of your pathology and you're like the other lecture content, specifically the pathology, to be honest, it's easier to be like to prepare or think on your feet for the actual encounter, because they'll talk about symptoms like, oh, this is happening, that's happening. So then you can be like, okay, I think it's, oh, it could be a obstructive lung disease. Oh, it seems like it's an asthma thing. And then you know the specific questions to ask, because sure, if it's a respiratory block simulation, let's say, oh, doctor, I've been having trouble breathing lately. Oh, and then like in your questions, you can ask, have you also had any changes in your skin? And if yes, then you're going to hone in on asthma. I actually have a sheet. I made a summary sheet. I didn't end up using it as much as I wish I could have, because I was so overwhelmed with juggling everything. But it's a very useful sheet, and I plan on using it a lot for term 5 as well. And just to be on top of my clinical reasoning skills. But I have this document where I have for each module the diseases that have been covered based on the simulations, and then 3 to 4 hallmark features for that disorder. And I'll share that. I'll post it on my Facebook page so that you guys can see and use it to your benefit. Obviously, you can add to it, you can think about it. I don't know. But use it actively. I feel like that's more funner than just reading off and But yeah, so I'll share my clinical skills resources for sure, but definitely make the most of your patient encounter simulations. You're at least doing it in a group. It's no judgment zones, and if there is judgment, shame on that person who is passing judgments. I don't think anybody should. We're professionals here, but it's a no judgment zone. We're all learning, and I think I learned a lot. I didn't do every simulation, obviously, because you have to share roles, so you can't always hog a certain part just because you're comfortable with it. Sometimes I did physical exams, sometimes I did patient history taking, sometimes I think I did closure time 1 or 2 times. So definitely hop between the different roles, but yeah, so that you can really get an idea of, get some feedback on how things are going to be like for the actual encounter, because you have what, FTCM, 3 encounters and a physical exam skill. For each block, you're going to learn the physical exam skills related to that system. So when you're learning the respiratory, it was like, oh, how do you auscultate the lungs? How do you, there's special tests for pneumonia you would have to conduct if you suspect pneumonia. So that's what the physical exam skills lab is, where you're just learning about the different types of things you can perform for each thing. And there's rubrics, and you will use those rubrics religiously when you do your OCX prep, and as even for your encounter prep, because when you're, especially for the physical exam, unfortunately because it's Zoom, you have to literally talk through your physical exam, which is annoying as heck. So using that rubric, knowing what to say, because you don't want to waste time, you only have a few minutes, you have to get through as soon as you can and in a proper manner, so use those rubrics. But 3 simulations, a physical exam skills component for each block, and then you have your SOAP assessment. SOAP assessments, you're doing the same thing that you do in your simulations as a group, but now you don't have your facilitator saying anything. They're just telling you time's up, time started, that's it. So it's all up to the group work, group teamwork to get enough information so that you can write a proper SOAP note. You do those on your own. So for the first SOAP note, you have 15 minutes to type, which is very generous. And then the second SOAP note, you only have 10 minutes to write a SOAP note, beginning to end. So it seems impossible, but believe me, with practice, you'll get it. You'll get it for sure. And I think with RHS, there was like the respiratory as well as the head and neck we got. And then here we had abdomen as well as reproductive for DERS in terms of physical exam skills. But you also have PE assessments. So with the PE assessment, it's again like the multiple choice thing I mentioned. It comes and goes. It's very fast. It's only one block of questions, 48 questions. And for that, you really have to know your look through your those PDFs, the physical exam skill PDFs. And I think it's very nice the way they organize these clinical skills practice and evaluations, because the fact that the PE assessment was earlier than the patient encounters, like the actual OCX, was very helpful. Because for me personally, it was very daunting thinking of like, oh my God, okay, I can conduct a patient history fine, I'll ask the questions I need to ask, I will get through that. But then the physical exam, how do I get everything out that I need to? And to be honest, having that PE assessment like in my head, like preparing for that helped a lot for like preparing for the OCX, that physical exam part. So it was really good on the administration's part. It's not important being right with any of these assessments, any of these simulations. It's not important like, oh, they got the right diagnosis. No, nobody cares about that right now. It only matters that it's like, it's important to follow the process, to know how to go, like keeping that structure. That's what matters. That's all they care about at this point. And I think with the OCX this term, like we were told what system in that exam to like perform, like physical exam to conduct with our patient. In term 5, we aren't provided that. So we have to use our own reasoning judgment based on what we got from the history. Okay, what do I have to conduct? What exam do I have to conduct? And actually I was preparing as if we weren't going to be given that information. It didn't click to me until the actual exam. It's like, oh wow, we're actually we're told what system to focus on. So that was a nice plus, but it's good to be a little ahead of the game to like push your clinical reasoning that extra mile by thinking like, okay, if I have this symptoms, I should be thinking of these sort of diseases. And if it's these sort of diseases, this body system, like the abdomen or the reproductive system or the heart, that okay, now I'll have to perform this sort of exam. So it's good to tie those things together. And yeah, use your encounters as like, I mean, like the simulations, even if you're not conducting the history, even if you're just like a timekeeper, use those encounters to practice SOAP note like writing, to like, because that's how you'll get the hang of like increasing your speed, learning those acronyms, saving time. It's a great way to go about it. And I think that is all I have for clinical skills information. So let's go on to the next part. Okay, so in terms of resources used, so here's what I did. Little odd duckling here telling her ways. Oh my god, there's so much talking. Whew. My group studying, you know me. I love my group studying. Me and my study buddy, we think on the same wavelength. So I really reward for like I find it very rewarding. I don't recommend forcing yourself to group study with like somebody who you're not on the same wavelength with. Otherwise, it's gonna be it's gonna be hell, and it's a waste of time in that way. Like you're not like bouncing off information as you need to or whatever. So group studying, but like consider that suggestion wisely. I loved it, and we it was a great way for me to cumulatively review. She's my human Anki, my study buddy, and I think the study buddy mindset is like retained even in my self study as a result. Like being on top of trying to find, oh heck, I was like looking at I've sprained my wrist recently, and like I was applying some balm thing on it, and I was looking at like, oh, what's in here. It was a topical NSAID, and I'm just like reading this, and I'm like, oh my god, this is non-selective, and then I'm tying it into 100 different things at like in that moment. So it's a good way. Like I feel like if you can foster the right mindset with whatever way you're going about studying, revising, and if you can like extend that at other times in other fields, I feel like that's a win-win. So that's what group studying did for me. It forces me to keep actively thinking, even when I don't want to. It's seeping into my day-to-day life. I feel like it's to the annoyance of some of like my viewers who want to enjoy their break, and here I am with my little topical NSAID story. But that is it really for the group studying point. But in terms of other stuff, so I did all the question sets, Sakai questions, and main and alternative cohort IMCQs. Everything that was provided on the Sakai IMCQs, I powered through that, and I milked those questions like I've been like blabbering for so long. I used those questions as much as I could. At times I was so exhausted so I couldn't, but for the most part I did my best to milk those questions. And then in terms of inconsistently, like, so the first two things I religiously, consistently stuck with this. Since term 2, like, I've stuck with that approach. But then with inconsistent methods, I did adopt the Red Bull schedule thing. That's posted, the Red Bull DES group. They have schedules. I used that for the first block or two, but then it kind of died like midway into CRS, so I didn't use them anymore. It didn't seem helpful for the way I go about things. I used SNL exams whenever I could, but then sometimes I was so exhausted and not enough time. I was like, okay, priorities. Like right now, it's more important for me to get used to the questions that the actual profs have written, and like they're the ones that write the exam. So I'd rather do the Sakai questions than worry about getting an SNL exam done just to have it checked off. So SNL exams whenever I could. 4 a.m. DES, oh my god, I loved that. I loved it. Naomi and them, they worked incredibly. Hats off to them. God bless them. They helped a lot with their content. Usually I'm not a fan of student-made stuff in general. Like because I'm like, oh, what if because I've had some times where I've like used it and then there's like not them specifically, other resources where it's wrong, and I'm like, am I using this to find other people's mistakes? I'd rather not. So but the 4 a.m. DES is pretty top notch, so I definitely recommend that if anybody hasn't heard of it yet. I'm sure most people have, but they're very good. But the thing is, I don't like, they themselves got busy with step prep and stuff, so the frequency of stuff coming out for term 4 was less. So I only used it really at the beginning, and I use it more as a refresher. I don't use it to learn the stuff actively. I do the learning on my own time. This is more like, okay, I have a little bit of free time. I'll use some of Naomi's stuff to just like maybe better compartmentalize, better like hammer things down. But that's about it. Pathoma I did use inconsistently, but whenever I had tough stuff, like I used it for the heart stuff a lot because the heart path was quite tough, and reproductive path very helpful, very, very helpful. Especially for gestational pathology, Pathoma is fantastic. So he connects it in a logical way, a very nice storyline fashion, so that by getting getting that ball rolling, that logical ball rolling for pathology for any disorder, you can eventually reason out, tease out, okay, so if this is happening, these clinical symptoms should be expected. So it's a really good resource. It's worth investing in. You get like the book, the hard copy book, and then like access to the whole library. I know there's like pirated version circulating around, but it's kind of nice to just invest and have it on your fingertips without worrying about downloading and all of that headache. And then there was first aid. I used a little here and there. I should use it more. I don't use it enough, but I feel like I'll use it more when I do my revisions, like during my break time. So maybe like in the upcoming few weeks, I'll use for step one, like this first aid book, more to revise stuff that I've learned in the past term. Yeah. And in terms of clinical skills, like I said, I study buddied it as well for like the OCX practice and simulations. We set up times to do practice simulations. Okay, be ready. I'll be ready with a door note tomorrow, study buddy. And like we used to give a warning. Okay, it's this system, so keep your heads up about it. And we'd conduct the full interview all by herself or all by myself, and the full physical exam. And then we try to, like, work on each other's weaknesses. We try to make stories to make the physical exam stuff stick, and just hammering it out, talking it out together. I did a lot of whiteboarding on my own time, and of course the small groups, but the whiteboarding it and just trying to, I'm a person that writes a lot, so it was very nice to just keep like just seeing, okay, first I have to talk about, like, I have to auscultate this and I have to do this and I have to do that, and just it helped for me personally. If it, like, I don't recommend it if that's not your way of going about things, but that is what I did. I feel like the study buddying and the small groups were the most key things that helped me prepare very well for the OCX. And so now with whatchamacallit, the hindsight, I wish I used first aid more consistently, because they have some really great tricks and tips to remember some tough stuff, to group better, to compartmentalize better. So I do regret not using it more often, and I feel like I'm going to, hopefully in my next reflection for term 5, I can say that I was using first aid religiously, but that's something to keep in mind. I want to diversify my long-term retention techniques a lot, because I feel like, sure, study buddies are great. In the semester it's great and stuff, but in our breaks when we don't get to talk as much, or we're preoccupied with unwinding, I don't have my human Anki by my side, so I need to have something to fall back on in the time that we aren't talking with each other. And we love each other, but it gets tiring after a while seeing each other's faces, so it's a nice break. So I feel like this is something I definitely will work on myself, and I do recommend for anybody who hasn't, to work on diversifying your long-term retention techniques. And then finally, I wish I dealt with burnout better so that I can continue actively evolving as a student. Because the thing is, the issue was, like, it's the Zoom school, and the worst part is, like, after, it's fine during the semester being alone like this, it's fine, it actually helps a lot. I've been doing very well since, like, with the Zoom school thing, but the issue is after the exam is done, you don't really get that sense of closure that, oh yeah, we're done with this block, celebrate, be proud, be happy. It's like, I feel it, but it's nice to, like, my family is sweet. They're nice enough to have, like, these, like, big food, like, feasts after I have an exam, but it's just, celebrating with people that you have struggled with, who have done the same material, and unwinding with them, that's a whole other experience. So that is something I miss dearly. But New York next year, hopefully that's something I look forward to that experience. But I wish, like, I had dealt with burnout better, and, like, obviously not having that closure moment that I was just talking about, that kind of fueled that burnout, because it's like, okay, I'm trying to relax, and again, learning that skill of properly relaxing and unwinding, it's hard. I don't know it yet. So I think learning to address those problems now, and learning to listen to myself more earlier on, I feel like that would have been better rather than later, because DERS, the reason why it was such a jackpot module for me, like, I loved it, and in the moment I felt stressed, but I loved it overall, was because, like, I had this eureka moment in this block where I was like, okay, I know I have a flaw. I have a flaw where it's like, I need to write a lot. I need to write things. I need to write it over and over. And, like, it doesn't sit if I just passively read or just talk about it. Like, it helps, but I definitely need to write it once. But then if I kept pushing that writing off till the weekends, and then the weekends I'm barely having enough time to apply questions. So this was for previous blocks. But then DERS, I made sure, like God help me, but I will get my notes done for the lectures that I learned today. In any, like, I have to, it has to be done. And so because I was on top of that on my day-to-day tasks, the weekends were just for applying, for making like, you know, like little algorithms to take my compartmentalizing up a notch. That was what my weekends were for. That's what my weekends are for. So then it worked out very well, like leading up to exams. So after the lectures were done, and then I did my PE. No, the PE assessment happened during classes time, but like after the last lecture was done, OCX prep done, and then the days after that, just prepping for the exam. I already had the notes done, so literally I was just questions, and that was beautiful because I was in that exam zone mindset. Just because I was applying, I wasn't writing notes at all at that point. So I wish I had dealt with burnout better so that I could have done what I did in DERS earlier. But it is what it is, and hopefully the next semester will be much better. But that is it for resources used. So let's move on to a little bit about other things. Okay, so we're almost done here, folks. So this is a nice little quote I liked a lot because it's a nice segue into what I will be talking about. Because I keep mentioning burnout, monotony, you know, all of that stuff. But, you know, in the end, it is what it is. So we can't do much what happens with our circumstances, but we can do a lot with how we react to it, how we cope with it. So, yeah, I'll talk to you guys a bit about how I coped with it. So, here we are, my burnout busters. We have hiking. Oh my god, there were like, I just love it, especially in now that like the trees and flowers, you see so much more like greenery. It's so much nicer. But even in the winter I used to go hiking, and it's just a nice escape from the screen, from these blue walls, just constantly being at this desk. It was nice. It was because you feel unfit too, right? And it doesn't help feeling all groggy and all of that. So hiking was great. There was this one time where I was just so tired and so fed up with everything. So it's like I finished the lectures, I got through my notes that I had to do, and I went on a walk. And I just kept walking and walking. I'm like, I should turn around now, but I just kept walking. And I've had many moments like that, and it just goes to show, it's like, address that burnout sooner than later. And it's not like a one-step solution. It's like it'll keep coming back up, so just be ready to keep pushing it down, right? So there's hiking, there's yoga. Yoga is what's keeping me sane. It is my strength, it is my stay, it is everything for me. So I feel like, especially given the monotony, I know I said it again, you could put like a timer or like a counter to see how many times I say that, but with the dryness of Zoom med school, and like not everything is tangible. I like seeing tangible results, and especially when my own performance was weak at times, or I had a bad exam or something, it just was so hard to be like, okay, tomorrow another block starts, okay, another lecture, let's sit through this again. It was really hard. But then having yoga, having myself have some sort of progress in some sphere of my life, it made a big difference in just keeping myself collected and maintained to just get to the finish line. I love it. And then family, that's another plus. It's like a plus and minus at times, because it's like, you know, we have these evening chai time. We have tea in the evenings, and like the whole family sits, talks, chats. And it's so hard to, like, you know, leave that space, but you have to go back to studying. But they have been so supportive, so wonderful. And it's just a nice break talking with people who aren't doing the same thing as you. Like, you know how previously I was saying it's nice to unwind after an exam with people who've been through the same thing? Well, when you're really sick and tired of med school at times, it's a blessing talking with people who have nothing to do with your field. And that's a reason why I hate looking at medical stuff in my free time, because no, I need a life beyond this. Like, I love it. I love medicine, but it's just nice to have a break and grow as a person, like grow in different ways than just as a med student, as a doctor to be. So family was very nice with that. And Yeah, they're my little cheerleaders. I love them. And then embroidery. This is a new skill. I usually do knitting and stuff, but embroidery was very fun. Um, so with that, like, it's like I said, I like tangible things, and this was a pretty thing I made. And yeah, it's a new skill set, and yeah, why not? I manifested my inner grandma in this lockdown. But let's go on to the next part. Okay, so selectives. This is something I don't hear many students talk about, which is surprising, and it's strange. It's like I feel like people should do more of these things. People do clubs and stuff, which is great, and they do, like student reps and stuff, which is fine, which is nice. Those are great opportunities to grow as an individual as well. But the selectives, there's just so many interesting skills you can learn on the side, a nice little break. It's another burnout buster in a way. I did, well, for this semester I did 2. Apparently you're only allowed to do 1, but then the thing is I'd already registered and I like called to check. I mean, like I emailed to check, and then the person there, they said that like, well, you've already done it, so it's like I can't officially say you can't, like, stop you from doing it now that you've registered, but he's like, I'm sure you can handle it, and I did handle it. So yeah, like in term 2, yeah, in term 2 I did the beginner yoga selective, but then in this term 3, 4, I did the yoga advanced selective. And the difference really is now you're going more with the selective into patient-centered perspective. You're going into the designing a treatment plan, like in terms of diet, the yoga positions, the regimen, like a bunch of different things. It's very holistic. You're designing a holistic treatment plan, which was very nice because of a lot of chronic conditions. It can't do much besides just manage symptoms with some meds, right? So, and a little bit of physiotherapy here and there. So this was a nice course in, like, finding ways that aren't necessarily like, the most common, but like there's still great alternative forms of therapy, nice supplementary forms of therapy that really focus on giving the patient more control in the, like, the progress of their disease and their healing and all of that. So I liked it a lot, and I do recommend it for anybody who wants to do it. And then I did the honors selective. You do have to have a certain grade point average to register for these, and you have to maintain it, I think. But with this, you have to watch a few videos about, like, learn like that, to get that instructor teaching perspective, and to learn some foundational skills. But then you have an assignment to write 10 questions, NBME style, so like how you would see it on the USMLE. You're designing those kinds of questions, and from content that you already know, and you submit that. And then also you have a session. You do like a IMCQ type of session with a group of students, so generally juniors. And I did NB1 or NB1 session. You do it with a partner who's also doing the honors selective. You two work through a session with a group of students, going through, you design the question, like you pick the questions and you talk through the concepts in the given amount of time. My group loved it. They loved us, so it was a very great experience. And I generally I like teaching in general, so like even since undergrad, high school, I always find opportunities to, like, do these kinds of things. So it was really nice having this as a selective option, and I look forward, hopefully, to, like, in residency and even down the line postdocs and stuff, to incorporate that, because it's really fun. It's really fun. And it's like you get that group study mindset, yeah, married to, like, beautifully to this instructor perspective, like with this course. So it makes you a better student by teaching, is what I want to say, really. And it's a great course, so definitely try to do it if you can. And in terms of what else is available, all of that's what's mentioned here, like medical Spanish, visual storytelling for research communication, all of this, applied cell bio and histo. It's available. There's a more extensive list available on the SGU portal, but yeah, definitely explore it. I am so excited. I'm thinking of medical Spanish, or there's one where it's like learning animation techniques, medical animation techniques for patient education. So I am so excited for that. I'll decide what to pick from them, but and apparently not now, but maybe a few semesters down the line, there's going to be culinary medicine, neuro and anatomical imaging. I'm like, why does all the good stuff have to happen when I'm not there? I'm so jealous of my juniors for that. Like culinary medicine, I love food. I love it. And then you're, oh, it's just so beautiful. And I'm just glad SGU is offering that. But yeah, take advantage of selectives because you want to have an enriched medical education. You know, have something more on your, like, not just to have on your, like, you know, transcript, but to have, like, there's not much, especially in Zoom med school, to enrich your medical experience. You know, attending lectures, doing the assessments, great, you're a great punctual student and this, that, but what more else are you? These selectives help you grow and, you know, show yourself more as, you know, a layered person, a dynamic person. So try them. And now basically the moral of the story. What is it? Pace yourself, use the study groups. It's just like use it for at least clinical skill practice. Like if anything, just use it for like OCX practice at least. Work with your weaknesses sooner rather than later. Don't have like the DERS moment. Don't have the jackpot moment in the last module like I did. Have it earlier on. Address that burnout in the moment. Don't be like, oh, it's normal. Empathize. Empathizing with yourself. Like, oh, it's okay. I like, you know, I can afford to push things off. It's like, this is like a hard journey. Yeah, be sympathetic, be empathetic with yourself, but don't make it a weakness that you're like, you know, you're cutting yourself too much slack. You're gonna balance it well so that you can really get to the finish line without being traumatized. So yeah, that's a big thing, and appreciate the good, bad, and ugly, especially with how far you've come. Like especially with my clinical skills, my history taking. Oh my God, if somebody recorded that first small group, and now in my patient like the exam, I am so proud of myself. I'm not even ashamed of bragging about it. I am so proud of myself. And I'm so proud of like people in my class that we've come a long way. And I think that needs to just be appreciated. Like a moment of silence for that. Like, God, it's so big. Like the stuff used to scare the crap out of me. Excuse my language. It scared the crap out of me. Like, how am I going to go about this? But now I am not scared. Like now, if I like, let's say if I went shadowing with my mentor, I could easily. I feel like I would be scared a little, but like I'm not afraid to take on the challenge of conducting one of like his patients' histories, and then obviously I know the fact that I will be continuing with Zoom school. With the next semester. I know some people in my class are returning because they were lucky enough to get both doses in time. I couldn't. Thank you, Canada. But yeah, so I'm gonna make the most of my tough situation. I won't get access to hospital visits like in person like my group members, the other people in my class who are able to make it to the island will, but otherwise everything is pretty much the same, and I feel like I can compensate for it, hopefully. But I will post stuff and with that, you know, my compensating during my break, because I hope to, because I have my PD kit, so I'm gonna hopefully use just auscultating, just checking for those things. Like, you know, I have all those physical exam PDFs from the small groups, so hopefully I can use that, a little bit of YouTube. Just be resourceful. It's like this is what it is at the end of the day, so that you know, I can compensate for the deficiencies I've had due to my circumstances, right? 90% how I react to it, so I'm gonna react well. Yeah, my family are my guinea pigs, and we're gonna hopefully, I'm hoping today I can do a nice cardiac exam today, do the full, you know, auscultating, heaves, thrills, all of that, but let's see how that goes. I'll keep you posted, but overall, it's a great term. Savor it, enjoy it, whine, vent, but then also cherish it and appreciate how far you've come. Absolutely. And that's it. That's it. Thank you for listening. You guys are champs for whoever has made it this far. And just, you know, follow my Facebook page because that's where the resources will be, the ones I'll be adding regarding the things that I used for the OCX prep. I think I went really hard with that. I feel like a lot of people maybe portion their time well, but I didn't. But heck, I made a lot of resources for that, so I will share that on the Facebook page. Instagram also, like, because a lot of my stories are there, and then the YouTube channel for the videos and latest updates. So follow. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again after term 5. Bye, guys.